And again, we are recording today's webinar just so you can have this afterwards and you can reference back to everything that we've touched on today. So our agenda for today, first off, we're going to do our introduction, like I said, just some general housekeeping. After that, we'll jump into module 1, which is our MWMA overview. So that MWMA overview, what we're going to do is go over what is MWMA itself, what are the benefits to this system, and also we're going to go over each report that we're going to touch on. We're going to go over at a very high level, and then we'll break down each of those reports in the following modules. Module 2, we're going to jump into the initial incident report. We'll talk about, again, how that is conducted in the system. What is your role with that report? And what are your responsibilities there? And then after that, we'll jump into module 3, which is the risk mitigation and investigation report. Now that risk mitigation and investigation report is the follow-up report to the initial incident report. And again, we'll talk about your role there and specifically what you can do with that risk mitigation and investigation report. After that, we'll take about a 10-minute break, give everyone a chance to stretch their legs and get up, get a cup of coffee if you need. And then we'll come back and we'll jump into module 4, which is the case manager fact-finding report. And we'll talk about specifically your level of access to that case manager fact-finding report and who it's really reserved for. And then lastly, our big module here, we're going to go over module 5, which is our CHFS fact-finding report. That report is specific to you as an internal reviewer. You're the only one that has access to it. So we'll spend some time on that, making sure that you fully understand what your role is there and how to specifically navigate that report. After that, we'll take about a 10-minute break, give them a chance to stretch your legs real quick, and then we'll come back for our question and answer session, right? So that's your opportunity. If you have any questions about the material we're going over today, to ask one of our subject matter experts, get their opinion, and clarify any points that you'd like before we leave today. After that Q&A session, we do have that evaluation at the very end, like I said. Again, that will be your opportunity to provide feedback on today's training and let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, and what we can improve upon. So at this point, we'll move to our next slide. And we do have a little icebreaker here. And the purpose of this icebreaker is, again, to get your feedback, but also to introduce you to the Zoom polling feature. And this is going to be used throughout today for our knowledge check questions. So if you're having any issues right now, please do let us know. Something I want to point out as well is that if you have your pop-up blocker on, the Zoom polling feature might not work. And also if you're using Internet Explorer, it might not work. So 2 things to do before we get to our knowledge checks. First and foremost, make sure your pop-up blocker is off. Second, if you're in Internet Explorer, please switch over to Chrome, Edge, or Firefox. Those are kind of the 3 supported browsers. But what we'll do right now is I'll go ahead and read this polling question, and I'll bring it up on your screen. But if you could have any superpower, what would it be? Would it be A, to fly, B, X-ray vision, C, super strength, D, teleportation, or E, mind reading? So I'm going to go ahead and bring up that polling question for you. And it should launch, and you should see it on your screen. We'll give everyone about a minute to go ahead and answer that question for us. All right, so it looks like everyone's gone ahead and voted. So at this point, we'll go ahead and end our polling, and we'll share those results. It looks like a pretty even tie between teleportation and mind reading. Again, those would be pretty cool. Flying would be pretty cool as well. Super strength. Doesn't look like X-ray vision was a real popular choice, but again, we just want to display what that Zoom polling feature looks like so everyone's familiar with it as we navigate through our knowledge checks today. So go ahead, we'll stop sharing results, and we will bring up our next slide. And we're going to jump into module 1, which is that MWMA overview. So if we go to our next slide, we'll look at what our objectives are for today. So first and foremost, we want to recap what MWMA incident management functionality is. So we're going to go over the initial incident report, the risk mitigation investigation report, case manager fact-finding report, and the CHFS fact-finding report. So we're going to talk through each of these reports, what your roles and responsibilities are there, and your level of access to each report. Okay, we're going to give that high-level overview now, and then we'll break down each of these reports screen by screen in the system. We're also going to go over again updates to MWMA incident management functionality. So we'll jump on all those topics throughout this overview. So the Medicaid Waiver Management Application, again, that is what MWMA stands for, is a system that supports all phases of an individual's Medicaid HCBS waiver enrollment rights. So that includes modifications to their waiver case, reassessments, and ongoing case management activities. And some of the benefits to the system, again, we have them listed there, but I'll just give a quick overview. Again, it's an integrated system that's utilized by a variety of user groups. So it allows for, again, multiple user groups to come together and provide services for citizens across the Commonwealth. Also, it maintains a consistency in recording information. So that's pretty specific, pretty useful, is that we want to make sure whenever we're providing services that that there's consistency in the way we record that information, just so our efforts run parallel. Also, electronic documentation that minimizes the use of paper. So again, electronic documentation not only minimizes the use of paper, but allows us to kind of have that central data storage hub where we can look at an individual's case across multiple agencies if need be. Also, as well, automatically generated tasks. So I don't know about you, whenever I'm in a system, I do appreciate a task-based system where I can click start, navigate through specific screens, and I know once I click submit, I've done my job. So that is quite useful, especially when you're providing services and trying to maintain that level of consistency across the board. Also stores past and present information. So again, past and present information in that central data hub just allows us to have a holistic overview of that individual's case and provide better services for them. So quite a few benefits for the Medicaid Waiver Management Application. Again, that is MWMA. So we just wanted to hit on that before we jump to our next slide, which is going over incident management functionality in your role. So what we're going to touch on right now is, again, internal reviewer incident management responsibilities. So there are 4 specific reports that pertain to incident management in MWMA. As you can see here, we have them listed out on your screen. The first one is the initial incident report. Second is the risk mitigation investigation report. Third is the case manager fact-finding report. And fourth is the CHFS fact-finding report. What I'm going to do right now is go over these in detail at a very high level. And then, like I said, we'll break each of them down into further detail. But that initial incident report, this can be completed by the internal reviewers, direct service providers supervisors, and case managers. So all 4 of those parties can complete that initial incident report, but really it's reserved for those direct service providers, supervisors, and case managers. You as an internal reviewer will have access to it, but again, it's not something that we see as being part of your daily operations. What's collected in that initial incident report is really basic details of the event which took place, again, including the date, the time, notified parties, category of the incident, as well as any supporting documents. So again, that is the very first report in our incident management module. The second is the risk mitigation and investigation report. Again, you do have access to this report, but it is really reserved for direct service provider supervisors or case managers. And it's really a follow-up report where, again, you can go ahead, re-verify previous findings, as well as report any additional details. Our third report, that is our case manager fact-finding report. This is reserved solely for case managers. So case managers are the only ones who can conduct this report in the system. However, you as an internal reviewer can review the details of that report. So I just want to point that out. You can't conduct the report, but you can review the details and findings that that case manager found. And again, what's going to be conducted there is really just that case manager is going to go ahead and enter in additional details gathered from interviews they've conducted with other witnesses. The fourth report here is our CHFS fact-finding report. Now, this is, again, is specific to you as an internal reviewer. You're the only one who has access to this report. And really what it allows you to do is to, again, add additional details that you found from interviews that you've conducted with other individuals. Something to point out is that this is automatically triggered in the event of a reported death. So if a death is reported, in a previous report, this report will be triggered as a task for you to complete. Just want to point that out. So again, you have access to all these reports in various degrees, but you cannot conduct a case manager fact-finding report. So I might highlight that, might write that down, it might come up a little bit later on, but you cannot conduct that case manager fact-finding report. All right, so again, that's our high-level overview of incident management in MWMA. But again, we'll break down each of these reports in just a little bit. So this brings us to our first knowledge check question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through the knowledge check question first, and then I will go ahead and bring up the polling question. But first and foremost, what does MWMA stand for? Is it A, the Medicaid Waiver Management Administration? Is it B, Medicaid Waiver Management Application? Or is it C, the Medical Waiver Management Application? So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and bring up that polling question for everyone. It should appear on your screen in just a second. We'll give everyone about a minute to go ahead and answer that question. Looks like we're waiting on one more person, so if you haven't gone ahead and voted yet, please do. All right, we have 100% participation. That's awesome. We'll go ahead and end polling, and I will share those results. Again, it looks like we had 100% here, so congratulations, we're off to a good start. 100% everyone got this correct. So again, it is B, MWMA stands for the Medicaid Waiver Management Application. So we'll stop sharing results, and we'll move to our next knowledge check question. And that is, internal reviewers can conduct all the following reports in MWMA except for, is it A, the case manager fact-finding report, B, the initial incident report, C, the risk mitigation investigation report, or D, the CHFS fact-finding report. So I'll go ahead and bring up that polling question. We'll give you all about a minute to go ahead and answer for us. All right, so it looks like everyone's gone ahead and answered. So we'll go ahead and bring up the correct answer as well as share our results. And that correct answer is A, the case manager fact-finding report, right? So you can conduct the initial incident report, you can conduct the risk mitigation investigation report, and you can conduct the CHFS fact-finding report. However, the case manager fact-finding report, only case managers can conduct that. However, you can go ahead and look at the details of that report. So just something to keep in mind as we move forward. So we'll stop sharing results at this point, and we'll move to our next slide. And that is going to be module 2, which is our initial incident report. So again, we're going to go into our objectives here in just a second, and we're going to kind of give an overview as to what we're trying to accomplish here. But first and foremost, what we want to do is identify when it would be appropriate to submit an initial incident report. And we're also going to go over how to create and complete an initial incident report. Now, something I do want to call out is if you look at the bottom of that screen, you do have a little asterisk there and a please note. And that is just to let you know again that internal reviewers are not expected to complete initial incident reports on a daily basis. Again, but you maintain the ability to do so if need be in MWMA, right? So again, as an internal reviewer, if that's your role in COG, you're not going to be expected to necessarily do these on a daily basis, but you have the ability if need be. So that's why we're going to go over it. We also want to show you kind of a holistic overview of the incident management module in MWMA and what different roles are doing as well. So that's why we're showing it, and that's why we're going to go into specific detail here on our next slide. So the initial incident report, again, you as an internal reviewer have the ability to start an initial incident report. You should always do so anytime, and again, I might highlight this, might write this down. You should initiate an initial incident report anytime an event which occurs that impacts the health, safety, welfare, or lifestyle choice of a waiver participant, right? So anytime you witness an event like that, please do make sure to start that incident report. Again, that is what our direct service providers are doing, direct service provider supervisors and case managers as well. They're operating under that same assumption that anytime they witness an event like that, they'll go ahead and they will start that report. Now, the way in which this is accessed in MWMA is that it can be accessed on the individual summary screen. So we'll go through that in a little bit, like I said, with our step-by-step instruction. But first, before we do that, what we'll do is kind of give an overview of kind of what you can and cannot do as an internal reviewer with the initial incident report. So you can initiate an initial incident report in MWMA, and you can view incident reports for any individual. Now, what you cannot do is update incident report data for that initial incident report. So just something to call out there before we move on to our next slide. So we're going to get into our system navigation at this point. What I'm going to do is bring up my annotation feature so I can kind of call out what I'm talking about as I'm moving through this presentation. But first and foremost, we are looking at our home dashboard here, right? So when you log into MWMA, this will be the first thing you see. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to identify the individual for whom we would like to make this initial incident report. So to do that, we have to quick search. So as you can see in the top right-hand corner there's that quick search box. We would go ahead and click that, and we would be navigated to our next screen. So upon clicking quick search, we are brought to the search individual screen. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that, again, the search individual box in the top left-hand corner, that is selected. Upon doing that, our search individual criteria is going to display. All right, as you can see right there in that red and blue call-out box, and we can search by multiple criteria, right? So I want to call out first and foremost this identifier type dropdown. So from that identifier type dropdown, you can select whatever identifier you'd like. So say, for instance, we select Medicaid ID, we could do that. And then we could come on over to the right here, where it says identifier value, input that value or input that Medicaid ID number, and click search. Now there's another way to do this as well. We could also just search by first and last name if we'd like. So as you can see right here, we have our first and last name field on the left-hand side. So you go ahead, enter in that first name, enter in that last name, and then you could go ahead, you could click search. And that'll bring us to our next screen. So we're still looking at that search individual screen. So as you can see here, we have our search results at the very bottom of the screen. I'll go ahead and highlight that with a blue call-out box. So again, we've searched our individual, we're looking at our search results. And the first thing we want to do before we select an individual is make sure that it is in fact the correct individual. So we have multiple identifier information here that we can use to ensure that this is the correct individual, right? So we have the individual number, we also have the individual name, that individual's date of birth, their social security number is listed there, as well as the waiver case number, Medicaid case number, and their Medicaid ID number. So all that information is listed there for you to identify this is the correct individual. And once we're sure of that, we can go over and we can click on the green hyperlink where it says the individual's name. All right, so after doing that, we'll be brought to our next screen, which is the individual summary screen. So on the individual summary screen, we get a broad overview of this person, right? So we can look at, specific information. We can also ensure that this is the correct individual still. So it has their Medicaid number, reported social security number, date of birth, all that great information is listed there. We also have the waiver programs associated with them in the bottom there, as you can see. But something I want to point out and something to call attention to is this case action box, which is on the right-hand side. In that case action box, we have quite a few useful pieces of functionality there. We have view documents, we have view plans of care, assessment history, we have the message center, we have view tasks, but we're here to create a new incident. So what we would do if we were a direct service provider or whoever is here to create this incident, we would come on down to where it says incident management, and we would click on that incident management tab. Now once we click on the incident management tab, we're brought to our next screen, and that is our individual incident summary screen. So as you can see here, we have all incidents that are related to the individual, right? So all incidents that have been reported on behalf of this individual are listed there in that blue call-out box that I just put on your screen. Now we have an incident ID number for each of these incidents, so we could click on that for more information. But it gives you a broad overview, right? Because it shows you the classification of the incident. Was it critical or non-critical? It also shows you the type of incident, whether or not it was behavior, whether it was an injury, things of that nature. And it shows you the discovery date and status, right? So the date was discovered, whether or not, this incident is in progress, whether or not it's closed, all that great information is listed there. But we are here to create a new incident, right? So again, the individual incident summary screen, I want to stress this real quick. That's where you're going to go ahead and create that new incident. So what we would do is we would go and we would click that green box where it says create new incident on the individual incident summary screen, and that would bring us to our next screen. Okay, so we've started our new incident. We're currently on the first screen of our initial incident report, and that is the individual information screen. So again, we're just going to review the information that's listed here, ensure that we have the correct individual, all right? So we can look at the name, we can look at their Medicaid member ID, their social security number, date of birth. All that information is listed there for us to review and ensure that this is in fact the correct individual. So after having done that, what we would do is we'd come on down to the bottom right-hand corner, and again, we would click that next button. So at this point, we are looking at our reporting provider detail screen. So again, a lot of useful information here on the top here. We have an overview, the reporting provider details section. Again, it shows you the provider number, shows you their physical address, all that great information. But what I want to call attention to specifically is this first mandatory field that we have listed, and that is, did you witness the incident, right? So the first thing you're going to do is signify whether or not you witnessed the incident. So you could select yes or no there. And then you could come on down where it says add witness. And again, if it was you as an internal reviewer or direct service provider, you can add multiple witnesses to this incident. So as you can see there, you can go ahead, click that add witness button, and you can start entering in the information about that individual. Just want to point out that you can add multiple witnesses to an incident. So again, just to give that holistic overview of kind of what happened. Next, we have our, is the responsible provider same as reporting provider? So I'm going to go ahead and call that out with another blue call-out box. That's in kind of the bottom half of your screen there. And if that were the case, we go ahead and click that checkbox. And then we have a provider drop-down as well, where we could go ahead and select the select the provider from that drop-down. After we filled out all these mandatory fields, right, we've added our witnesses, we've done our due diligence, we can go ahead and we can click next. Now at this point, we are looking at our incident detail screen. So this incident detail screen, this kind of gets to the heart of the event that actually took place, right? We're going to enter in that information. But I want to point out that it's kind of broken into two sections. So that's the way I'm going to go over the screen. First, I'm going to talk about the first half, which is going over location details. And then the second half, we'll get into the actual details of the event that took place. So on the top here, I'll go ahead and highlight what I'm going to talk about in particular with a blue call-out box. So that should show up on your screen right now. We're going to talk about, again, location information, right? So you're going to go ahead in this very first field, which is a mandatory field, and select a location from the location dropdown, right? So is it the day program? Was it in home? You can make it, a selection from any of the pre-populated options. Now, if any of those do not seem appropriate, there is an other option. So if you select other, there's a free-form text box that's going to populate. I'm going to go ahead and highlight that right now. And that box is if other specify, right? So if you selected other for the location, the if other specify free-form text box will populate, and you can go ahead and type in your answer. After you've done that, we'll come on down to our address line. So again, you're going to enter in the physical address of where the incident took place. And then you're going to come down below that and enter in the city, the state, the zip code, and the county of that incident. So again, that's the first half of our incident detail screen going over location information. The second half is going to give you the opportunity to provide specific details about what happened, right? So you come on down to where it says incident details. In that first box, which is mandatory, you would enter in details about what happened immediately before the incident. So there's an 8,000 character limit there. You can enter in quite a bit of information, and we encourage you to do so, right? After you've done that, you come down to our second mandatory field here in this section, and you describe the incident that took place. So what actually occurred, what were the events that took place? Go ahead and put that within that second free-form text box. After those two mandatory fields, we have a third one listed here, and that is what happened immediately after the incident. So again, even though it is a non-mandatory field, we still highly encourage you to fill it out just to give that holistic overview of what happens. Whoever looks at this next can see kind of, if someone comes back to review, they can see a good picture in their mind of what occurred. So again, we encourage you, even if it's not a mandatory field, to fill it out if it pertains to the event that took place. After we have all of these fields filled out, on our incident detail screen, we can go ahead and we can click next. Now this brings us to our notification screen. And this is a pretty unique screen and pretty useful because it allows you to enter in the date and time in which each party was notified, right? So we'll break this down real quick, but as you can see here, you can enter in the date of time in which, law enforcement was notified, a family member, private guardian, direct service provider, medical provider. There's quite a few options in which you can select from. So what you would do is, in our case, as you can see on our screen, we went ahead and entered the date and time the family member was notified. So that first field there, you enter in that date and time. Below there, there's some additional fields in which you can populate. So you could enter in the notification method, whether it was on via phone, email, or electronic, or fax. Those are all options which you could choose. And then you could also enter in the contact name for the notified entity. Again, you would go through this screen and you would enter in that date and time each party you notified was notified. But let's say, for instance, no parties were notified, there wasn't any reason to. There is a very small checkbox at the very bottom left-hand corner of your screen, and that is no notifications were required. So in the off chance that no one was needed to be notified, you could come on down to that bottom left-hand corner and you would select that no notifications were required checkbox. So at this point, we filled out our entire screen and we could go ahead and we could click next. All right. So right now we're looking at our incident category screen. Again, this screen is kind of broken into two sections as well. So first and foremost, I'll go over the top half, which is kind of going over date and time incident details there. And then we'll get into our second half of the screen, which goes over kind of the category of the incident itself. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that first section with a blue call-out box. In the first field we're going to focus in on is the date and time witnessed or discovered, right? So you would go ahead and enter in the date and time that you witnessed or discovered the incident. And then below that, we have another mandatory field, which is date and time of the incident approximated. So are you approximating date and time, or is this an exact time? Answer yes or no. Below that, we have what was the role of the individual in the incident. So you can notify whether or not that individual was the alleged victim or the alleged perpetrator. And then our last mandatory field in this section is the level of supervision at the time of the incident. So was it line of sight? Was it shoulder to shoulder? You can make the determination there in that fourth mandatory field. So that's the first section of our incident category screen. Next, we're going to break down the actual categorization section of this screen. So I'm going to highlight that with a blue call-out box. But as you can see here, we have multiple categories in which we can select from. We could select behavior, confidentiality breach, death, illness or injury, medication, suspected abuse. We could select any of those categories for the incident. And now once you see right here, we went ahead and selected in that checkbox illness and injury as our category type of the incident. And then we would go ahead and enter the date and time as well of that incident. Now, something I want to point out before we move on is that, again, whatever category you select here is going to queue up specific fields in our following incident subcategory and incident subcategory question screens. So whatever you select here is going to trigger those specific fields later on. So there is a uniqueness to the screen. It's quite dynamic in that aspect. So if you're making these incident reports and you see in multiple reports that the following screens look different, don't be too weirded out by that. It's because of what you selected on this incident category screen. I just want to point that out real quick. So at this point, though, we've gone ahead, we've entered our incident category. We can go ahead and we can move to our next slide. So on the previous screen, we selected our incident category screen, or we selected our incident category, and we're now looking at our incident subcategory screen. So like I said, illness and injury was selected on the previous screen, so you can see that listed there. But now we can select our incident subcategory. So we do have some pre-populated options here. We have fall, history of seizures, seizure activity without diagnosis, and seizure activity beyond an individual protocol. Now, if any of these don't seem appropriate, there is a free-form text box where you can go ahead and type in the type of illness and injury that occurred, and that would be your incident subcategory. So again, we have pre-populated options, but we also have that free-form text box for you to input whatever you deem appropriate. Now, once we've done that, we could go ahead and we could click next. Now this brings us to our incident subcategory question screen. Now on the incident subcategory question screen, again, a lot of this is specific to what we selected on our previous screen. So you can see at the very top here, we have illness and injury. That represents the category that was selected in our incident category screen. But we do have additional questions, right? So first and foremost, we have a mandatory field, and that is whether or not the illness or injury was major or minor. So go ahead and make that determination. And then below that, we have a non-mandatory field, and that is whether or not it was medical or psychiatric. So you can make that determination as well. Below that, we have our fall, which is our incident subcategory. And we have a couple additional questions about that. So was the fall witnessed? We can answer yes or no. We have a mandatory field, which states fall was either major or minor. And we have another field which goes over the crisis plan, whether or not that was followed, yes or no. And then we could select the target body of the target body area, right? So we could go ahead from those pre-populated options and we could input the arm, the face, the head, stomach, chest, hand, neck. Any of those options we could go ahead and select just to give that holistic overview, of what that incident looked like and where it occurred on that individual. And once we have all of our mandatory, and non-mandatory fields filled out, we could go ahead and we could click next. Now this is going to bring us to the last screen in our initial incident report, and that is the document upload screen. So the document upload screen, something I want to point out is that it's not mandatory, but it's there for direct service providers, case managers, supervisors, you as an internal reviewer, to give or to upload supporting documentation that is relevant to the incident being reported. So that could include a list of current medications, it could include staff notes, administration records, any of that could be uploaded here just to provide supporting documentation. Now the way in which this is done is you would first go to where it says browse, you click that browse button, and that would allow you to again search your desktop for that supporting documentation. You could then go ahead, once you've selected your document, classify that under the document type dropdown, add any additional comments pertaining to the document, and then click attach. Now once you've clicked attach, that document is going to show up here in your document summary section right here. So it will show you the document type, the date, the comments, and the action associated to that document. If you want to attach another document or multiple documents, you can come down here and click attach another document, and you would just repeat that previous process. Now, once all of your supporting documentation is uploaded, you would then come down, you could either click save and exit, or you would go ahead and click submit, and that would allow you to submit this initial incident report. All right, so that brings us to the end of our initial incident report section. We go ahead and move to our next slide. And this is going to bring us to knowledge check number 3. So again, you heard me talk about this one at the very beginning of module 1 here. But that is true or false, an initial incident report should be started anytime you witness or discover an event which occurs that impacts the health, safety, welfare, or lifestyle choices of a participant. So true or false, and I'll go ahead and I'll bring up that question. We'll give everyone about a minute to go ahead and vote. So we're still waiting on a few more answers. So we have 2 more individuals who go ahead and give us a vote. We greatly appreciate that. Again, please, if we can, let's refrain from entering those answers in the chat. Again, if we can, let's make sure we're using that polling question. If you're having any issues with that, please do let us know, and we'll do our best to work through those with you. So at this point, we'll go ahead and end our polling, and we'll bring up the correct answer. And we will share our results. So again, looks like just about everyone got this correct, so good job, everyone. And the correct answer is A, true, right? So again, anytime you witness an event like that, you should go ahead and report that as an initial incident report. Something just to, again, focus in on here is that you have access to this initial incident report. You can conduct it, but it's not something we see as part of your daily operations. That'd be more so reserved for a direct service provider, a direct service provider supervisor, or case manager. So we'll stop sharing results at this point and we'll bring up our next knowledge check question. And if you're having any issues with the polling, again, make sure that your pop-up blocker is off and that you are not using Internet Explorer. Again, if your pop-up blocker is on, you will not be able to access the polling questions. And if you're using Internet Explorer, you may run into issues there as well. So make sure that you're using, again, either make sure you're using Chrome, Firefox, or Edge when going through this webinar. So I'll bring up our next polling question. And that is question 4 here, which is, on what screen is a new initial incident report created? Is it A, the individual incident summary screen, B, individual summary screen, C, individual information, or D, provider information? So I'll bring up that polling question for everyone. All right, so we're still waiting on a few more individuals, and we'll give it about 10 more seconds to go. And voted yet, please go ahead and do so. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll end our polling. And the correct answer is, again, A, the individual incident summary screen. So it'll be a little tricky again, but individual incident summary screen, that's where you're going to go ahead and create that new incident report. All right, so we'll stop sharing results and we'll move on to our next question. Our next slide. And next we'll be going over is our module 3, risk mitigation and investigation report. So on our next slide here, we'll talk about that. Again, this is the follow-up report to the initial incident report. We don't see this as being part of your daily operations, but again, you do have access to it. You can conduct it. So we want to make sure that, again, we're giving you this holistic overview of incident management. So we're going to identify when it would be appropriate to submit a risk mitigation investigation report. And we're also going to go over how to start and complete the risk mitigation investigation report. So again, those are our objectives for this module. So the risk mitigation investigation, again is a follow-up report to that initial incident report. And internal reviewers are able to complete and review risk mitigation and investigation reports. So again, when an internal reviewer completes an initial incident report, the internal reviewer would initiate that risk mitigation investigation report task via the task dashboard. And we'll show you what that dashboard looks like in just a second. But something to point out is that internal reviewers can complete the risk mitigation and investigation report if they initiated the initial incident report. However, internal reviewers cannot complete the case manager sign-off task, as it is reserved for case managers. Now, what that case manager sign-off task is what that means is, in particular, is if a direct service provider supervisor completes a risk mitigation investigation report, then a case manager would receive a sign-off task for that report. That is not a responsibility that you as an internal reviewer have. You just have access to complete this risk mitigation investigation report if you completed the initial incident report as well. So just something to call out along the way. We can move to our next slide. Now again, the risk mitigation investigation report starts the task on your dashboard if you completed the initial incident report. So I'm going to go ahead and first and foremost, what we would do is locate the task which we need to complete, which is again the complete risk mitigation and investigation report task. we would go ahead and we would click start on that task. So go ahead and click start. At this point, we are looking at our incident summary screen, and we can look at, again, the associated reports to this incident. So first and foremost, we have the initial incident report that was conducted. It's already been submitted. But then we have our risk mitigation and investigation report. Again, that is currently awaiting initiation. So we go ahead, and if we want to, we go ahead and click initiate on the right-hand side here, and that would get us going on this risk mitigation and investigation report. So we clicked initiate, and that would bring us to our next slide, which is the incident detail screen. So something to point out here is that, again, on the incident detail screen, a lot of this information is pre-populated based off of what was input on the initial incident report. So as you can see here, we have what happened immediately before the incident, describe the incident that took place, and what happened immediately after the incident. All that is pre-populated information that was obtained from the incident detail screen in that initial incident report. What we can do though is we come on down here where it says comments about the incident, and we can input additional comments if we saw fit, and then we could go ahead and click next. Now that brings us to our actions taken screen. Again, some of this information is pre-populated. I'll go ahead and point that out real quick. Again, the date and time of discovery, date and time guardian was notified. All of that information is pre-populated from the notification screen on the initial incident report. What we would do is review that information. We would come on down here to our first mandatory field on the screen, which is, was everyone notified by required deadlines? We would go ahead and select yes or no. Now, if you select no to was everyone notified by required deadlines, the if not and who was notified and what was the reason, that freeform text box, which I just highlighted in blue, becomes mandatory, right? You'd have to populate that information. You go ahead and provide details there, and then you would move on down to our follow-up findings section, and you would enter in again what was the person's current status. So you'd select that. So you choose one there. You go ahead and enter whether that person was stable, whether they were seen by a professional, returned home. But if none of those pre-populated options seem fitting, you could come and you could select other, and then again another freeform text box would populate, and you could enter that information. Below that, we have one last mandatory screen that we're going to talk about, which is why did the incident occur? So go ahead and select one of those options, but if none of them were fitting, you could choose the other and then give that brief description. So that is the first half of our actions taken screen. Again, it's a long screen, so we're going to move to our next slide and show you what the bottom half looks like. So we have a couple more mandatory fields here. We have the identify needed changes to prevent similar incidents. So you would go ahead, you would enter one of those pre-populated options, or you could select other and give your brief overview. Now below that, we have another mandatory field, which is how many times has the incident happened in your agency or with another provider with this waiver participant in the past 3 months. So again, you could enter in that number, and that's just to see again if this is a reoccurring trend, something that's been going on within the agency. We have another mandatory field, what did you do to keep the waiver participant safe and safe following the incident? So go ahead and enter that information. And then last mandatory field, what are the investigating staff's recommendations for preventing future occurrences? So you would enter in all of those fields, and they are mandatory. You do have some additional non-mandatory fields listed here. We encourage you to go through those. Again, if there's anything that you can enter there that pertains to the incident that would help give that holistic overview, you go ahead and enter those details, and then you could click next. Again, this brings us to our incident category screen. We've seen this before in the initial incident report. A lot of this information is pre-populated. You could go ahead at this point and you could update some of this if you saw fit. So you'd review if there are any changes that you think need to be made, you could do that here. And then you could go ahead and you could click next. Now, after that incident category screen, we would navigate through incident subcategories and subcategory question screens, which would bring us to our document upload screen right here, as you can see. And on that document upload screen, again, you would review previous documents. You could go ahead and upload additional documents if you needed to. And at that point, if you'd uploaded all appropriate documents, you could go ahead and you would click submit on this risk mitigation and investigation report. So we'll go ahead and pretend we click submit. And that brings us to knowledge check question number 5. So I'll go ahead and bring up this polling question in just a second. But again, true or false, internal reviewers can complete risk mitigation and investigation reports. So I'll go ahead and get that brought up and give you all about a minute to answer that. All right, we're still waiting on a few more answers, so we'll give it about 10 more minutes. If you haven't answered yet, please do so. All right, so we're going to end polling and bring up our answer and share our results. Again, the correct answer is true. Y'all are doing a great job on these polling questions today. So the correct answer is true. Internal reviewers can complete the risk mitigation and investigation report. Great job, everyone. So we'll stop sharing results and we'll bring up our next polling question, which is, when should internal reviewers complete a risk mitigation and investigation report? Is it A, after a case manager conducts the initial incident report, B, after a direct service provider completes the initial incident report, C, when a case manager asks them to, or is it D, after an internal reviewer completes the initial incident report? So I'll go ahead and bring up that polling question. Again, we'll give you another 10 minutes to go ahead and answer that question. All right, so I'm going to go ahead at this point, end our polling question, and bring up the correct answer. And the correct answer is, again, it is D, after an internal reviewer completes the initial incident report, right? So again, you have to complete the initial incident report, then you would receive a task on your dashboard to complete that risk mitigation investigation report. So again, it looks like the majority got that right. So again, thank you everyone for following along and participating with these knowledge check questions. So I'll stop sharing results and we'll move to our next slide. And at this point, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll take about a 10-minute break. When we come back, we'll jump into our case manager fact-finding report, as well as that CHFS fact-finding report. So we'll take about a 10-minute break. If everyone could be back by 10:06, that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks. Hello, welcome back, everybody. So again, I hope everyone had a chance to stretch their legs, maybe get a cup of coffee before we jump into our next module. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead at this point and we'll move on to our next slide. And we're going to jump into module 4, which is the case manager fact-finding report. So we'll move on to our next slide and we'll look at our objectives here. First and foremost, we want to understand when a case manager would submit a case manager fact-finding report. So again, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but you as an internal reviewer, you can't conduct a case manager fact-finding report, but you can review the details. So we're going to go over when specifically a case manager would do this report, and again, the specific screen flow of that. So again, we'll go over what's appropriate to and how to actually navigate through one in the system. So that's really what our objectives are for us right now. But the case manager fact-finding report is the third report in the incident management module. And it acts as a follow-up report to the risk mitigation and investigation report and serves to gather information that you as an internal reviewer can use to make a final determination. Something to point out is that this report is only triggered if a case manager disagrees to sign off on the risk mitigation and investigation report. So that's the only time a case manager would really receive a task to complete this report, is if they disagree to sign off on that risk mitigation and investigation report. Something that you as an internal reviewer can do is you can view case manager fact-finding report details, but like I said before, you cannot conduct a case manager fact-finding report. So it's a brief overview before we jump into our system navigation. So we'll go ahead and move to our next slide. And as with most tasks, right, or all tasks associated with the incident management module, we're first going to come, or if a case manager was to complete a case manager fact-finding report, they would locate that on their task dashboard. So I'm highlighting that task with a blue call-out box, and then that individual would come down here and click Start on that case manager fact-finding report. Now, upon clicking Start on that task, the case manager is brought to that incident summary screen, which we've seen a few times already. But something to point out, right, is we have all of the reports associated with this incident. So the initial incident report, we have the risk mitigation investigation report, and then we have that case manager fact-finding report, right? So the first two reports have already been submitted, but the case manager would have to then come and click Initiate on that case manager fact-finding report. So once they click Initiate, they're brought to, again, the case manager fact-finding screen. So what they're going to do is they're going to go ahead and enter their findings, right? All the details pertaining to that. They have an 8,000 character limit. And then they would go ahead and select whether or not they agree or disagree to the outcome. After that, we have the was incident investigated, yes or no. So they would go ahead and select yes or no to that field. And they would go ahead and they would click Next. Alrighty. So at this point, we are brought to our fact-finding screen. Again, this is the second screen in the case manager fact-finding report. So the case manager is going to go ahead, make sure all of their mandatory fields are filled out. And as you can see, this first field here is fact-finding type. The fact-finding type, there's two options here. You have site visit or desk level. So they go ahead and select one of those. And then they would enter in the date of the fact-finding. So the date they actually went and conducted that. It would then come down to the location of fact-finding, select one from the drop-down, whether it be day program, in-home, or whatever is deemed appropriate. And then they would enter in the date and time of visiting the location, right? So make sure that that is all entered. Once all those mandatory fields were entered, that case manager would go ahead and they would click Next. So this brings us to the people interviewed screen. So the case manager would come through and they would make sure that they're adding each individual that was interviewed. As you can see up here, there is a people interviewed summary section. So right here, you can see people that have been interviewed. Again, you can see their last name, first name, date and time they were interviewed, as well as whether or not they're a witness. Now the case manager, if they wanted to add additional individuals, they would come and they would click on Add Individual. And then that would show right here, would show us our first name, which would go ahead and enter. That's a mandatory field. Last name, also mandatory field, enter that. And then if there was an associated title with that individual, we could enter that individual's title. We still have a few more mandatory fields. So we'd enter in the date and time that that individual was interviewed. the interview type, again, whether it's in person, via the telephone. We could enter yes or no, whether or not this individual was a witness, and then yes or no to suspended or reprimanded. So that is all of our mandatory fields. We still have one more non-mandatory field, and that is resigned or terminated. So select yes or no to that. And then that case manager, once they had entered all that information, they would click save. And that information would populate right where that people interviewed summary section is. Now, once the case manager had added everyone that was a witness that they had interviewed, or sorry, everyone that they had interviewed, they could go ahead and they could click next. That would bring the case manager to the evidence screen. And this is the fourth screen in our case manager fact-finding report. And right here, they would go ahead and enter how the scene was secured. Again, there's 8,000 character limit there, so they could add quite a bit of information. What evidence was collected? And then that last field here, if collected, how was it collected? Now, this allows the case manager to give kind of that holistic overview of the process that they conducted to collect this evidence, right? So not only the evidence collected, but the procedure that they followed to do so. Once they had done all that, they could click save and exit, and they could come back to this incident at a later time, or come back to this report, should I say, at a later time, or they could go ahead and click next to continue through this case manager fact-finding report. That would bring them to the document upload screen. So on the document upload screen, again, it's a non-mandatory screen. You don't have to upload documents if you don't want to, but it's a good way to, again, upload any supporting documentation. So what they would do is follow that process we've shown before. They would click browse, find the document on their desktop they would like to upload, classify that document type, add comments, and then they could click attach. Once they clicked attach, that would populate right up here in the document summary section. And if they wanted to add additional documents, they could click attach another document. Once all of that has been completed, they would go ahead and they would click submit. And that would bring the case manager through the entire case manager fact-finding report. So we have a few more knowledge check questions that we want to go over with everyone. So first one here is, when is the case manager fact-finding report conducted? Is it A, following the initial incident report, B, concurrent with the CHFS fact-finding report, C, preceding the case manager sign-off task, or is it D, after the risk mitigation and investigation report? So as you're answering this, I would think back to that incident, or the incident summary screen, and kind of the list in which these reports were shown. So I'll go ahead and bring up that polling question. All right, so it should be appearing on your screen right now. Take your time. So we're still waiting on a few more answers. If you haven't provided an answer yet, please do so. We'll give it about 10 more seconds. All right, so we'll go ahead, we'll end our polling, and we'll bring up our correct answer. We'll share our results as well. And that correct answer is D, after the risk mitigation and investigation report. So we'll stop sharing results, and we'll bring up our next polling question. And that is, what action triggers the case manager fact-finding report? Is it A, submitting the initial incident report, B, submitting the risk mitigation investigation report, or is it C, case manager disagreeing to sign off on the risk mitigation and investigation report? So I'll go ahead and launch that polling question for everyone. We'll give it about 10 more seconds. We're still waiting on a few more answers, so if you haven't provided an answer yet, please do so. All right, so we'll go ahead at this point and we will end our polling. We'll bring up that correct answer and we'll share our results. So, and the correct answer is C, case manager disagreeing to sign off on the risk mitigation and investigation report, right? So the case manager fact-finding report is a follow-up report to that risk mitigation and investigation report, but is only triggered if the case manager disagrees to sign off on the risk mitigation and investigation report. So great job, everyone. We're getting some great participation here. Everyone seems to be following along. So we appreciate that. We'll stop sharing results and we'll move to our next slide. And this is going to bring us really to the focus of today's training, which is the CHFS fact-finding report. Again, this is really the report that pertains to you as an internal reviewer the most. So we'll go ahead and move to our next slide, and we'll go over our objectives here. So first and foremost, we want everyone to understand when they, as an internal reviewer, should submit a CHFS fact-finding report. So again, what are the circumstances in which that would be appropriate? And they also want to understand kind of the CHFS report task flow. So we'll go over that in just a second. And here we go. So again, the CHFS fact-finding report in the MWMA incident management module is used solely by internal reviewers to record interview details in order to gather additional information about an incident. So we're going to take our time going through this because there's a couple of nuances here that I really want to make sure everyone understands, but I'm going to read this next section verbatim and then I'm going to break it down further. So first and foremost, the CHFS fact-finding report is triggered either automatically by task in the event of a death. So if a death is reported, you will receive a task, or manually by an internal reviewer clicking the Start CHFS fact-finding report on the individual incident summary screen. So please everyone take note of that, right? If say a direct service provider or case manager reports a death, that is going to trigger an automatic task on your dashboard for you to complete the CHFS fact-finding report. However, you can also complete this manually by clicking Start the CHFS fact-finding report on the individual incident summary screen. So there's two ways in which this report can be conducted, either by task in the event of a death or manually by you on the individual incident summary screen. Okay. So additionally, internal reviewers may manually start this, like I said, from the incident summary screen without any initial incident report or risk mitigation and investigation report having been conducted. So a few things here: you can complete the CHFS fact-finding report in MWMA, but you cannot complete a determination of CHFS fact-finding task unless a death is reported. So that second part right here, I'm going to go ahead and draw a box around it because I want to make sure everyone understands this. The determination of CHFS fact-finding task, that is the task that is generated on your dashboard in the event of a death, right? However, if you're starting it manually, it will show on the individual incident summary screen as the Start CHFS fact-finding report. So what we're going to look at next on our next screen is the dashboard, and we'll show you what that task looks like, again, in the event that a death was reported. So I'll go ahead and clear our previous drawing, and we're going to locate that determination of CHFS fact-finding report on our dashboard, right? So again, this is in the event of a death. You would locate that on your dashboard as the determination of CHFS fact-finding. Then you would go ahead and you would click Start on that task. That would bring us to our CHFS fact-finding determination screen. So here there's one singular field that is mandatory, and that is a CHFS fact-finding required for that particular incident? So you'd select yes or no for that. So in our case, we'd go ahead and select yes, and that would take us to our next screen. Now this brings us to our fact-finding screen. Again, this looks very similar to what we saw with the case manager fact-finding report. Again, a lot of the screens in the case manager fact-finding report are similar to what you will see in the CHFS fact-finding report. So the first field here is fact-finding type. So we selected site visit. We could also select desk level. And then we would go ahead and we would select the date of fact-finding, right? So we'd enter in that date in which the fact-finding was conducted. Below that, we have the location of fact-finding. So we could select day program, in-home, whatever seems appropriate or whatever we deem appropriate. And then we'd enter in the date and time visiting the location, right? So make sure that date and time is entered. That's a mandatory field. And below that, we have another mandatory field, which is additional information required? So this is a pretty unique field. Again, if you select yes to is additional information required, you can select below that in the required additional information, you can select which report you would like to see that direct service provider supervisor provide additional information on. So you could select either initial incident report or the risk mitigation and investigation report. Now again, depending on which report you select, that is going to trigger a task for either that direct service provider or direct service provider supervisor. So in our case, we selected the risk mitigation and investigation report. So that would create a task for that direct service provider supervisor to provide additional information. Okay, so at this point, we go ahead and enter in the information that we requested. And that would again, right here, if we click save and next, or save and request, that at that point would save the information we have entered so far. And that save and request button is at the bottom here. I'm going to highlight that with a blue call out box. So clicking save and request would save the information we'd input, and then it would create that task for additional information. We could also click next, and that would take us through our CHFS fact-finding report. So at this point, we are looking at our people interviewed screen. And again, what we can do here is we can go ahead and add individuals that we've interviewed. So if we wanted to, we would go ahead and we would click add individual. And that would populate this section in the red call out box where we would enter that individual's information. So we'd enter that first name, we would enter their last name, and then we could enter in the title. Again, that's a non-mandatory field, but you go ahead and enter that as well. And then we have another mandatory field, which is date and time. So enter in that, in which we conducted the interview type, whether it's in person, via the telephone, whether or not this individual is a witness, yes or no, suspended or reprimanded, yes or no, and then we have resigned or terminated. So all of those could be entered. And then once we have all that information in there, we could click save. That would populate that information right here in the people interviewed summary section. So you show the last name, the first name, date and time, as well as whether or not that individual is a witness. We could repeat this process and add as many individuals as necessary, and then we could click next. All right, so this brings us to our evidence screen. And again, same fields as we saw on our case manager fact-finding report, but again, we could enter in how is the scene secured, what evidence was collected, and if collected, how was it collected? So again, not only are we entering the evidence that was collected, but we're giving the kind of procedure that was followed to do so. At this point, we could click save and exit, or we could click next to continue on through our CHFS fact-finding report. Okay. So next we are brought to our outcome of fact-finding screen. And I want to break this down in two sections. So at the very top here, we have a couple non-mandatory fields which we could enter. There are 3 fields listed there. There's the waiver program associated, criticality of the incident, and date of discovery. So all that information can be entered. It's not mandatory, but again, that's something that we could input as well. But below that, we have some mandatory fields. So we have our findings and analysis. We go ahead and enter that in the free-form text box. We have an 8,000 character limit. So quite a bit of information can be entered. We have the was provider found in compliance with regulatory requirements, yes or no, again, a mandatory field. Is corrective action plan required, yes or no, mandatory field. Below that, we have a non-mandatory field. Was the incident required or referred to either A, the attorney general, B, DCBS, C, OIG, or D, the police. Below that, we have can incident be closed, yes or no, and then close date as well, and any comments that we find relevant. So we can go ahead and enter in all that information. Once we've done that, we go ahead and click save and exit, or we could click next. Alrighty, so that brings us to our document upload screen. Again, it is a non-mandatory screen, but it allows us to provide additional information, right? So we go ahead, upload any documents that we find relevant. make sure that we are uploading that supporting documentation as need be. And once we've done that, we could click submit. All right, so that brings us to our next knowledge check. And that is, what action triggers the CHFS fact-finding report task, right? So that task that we saw in our task dashboard, what would trigger that task? Is it A, submitting the initial incident report, B, submitting the risk mitigation investigation report, or C, a reported death? Or D, is it a reported fall? So we'll go ahead and bring up that polling question for you, and I'll give you all about a minute to answer that. So we're still waiting on a few more answers, so we'll go ahead and give you about 10 more seconds. If you haven't provided an answer yet, please do so. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll end polling at this point, and we'll bring up our correct answer, and we will share our results. So congratulations, about all of us got this correct, so awesome job, everyone. And that is C, a reported death, right? So that is what would trigger the CHFS fact-finding report task. So we'll stop sharing results, and we will move on to our next knowledge check question. This is our last knowledge check question. So again, thank you everyone for participating in these. But again, the question is, who can complete a CHFS fact-finding report? Is it A, case managers, B, direct service providers, C, direct service provider supervisors, or is it D, internal reviewers? So we'll go ahead and launch that polling question. We'll give everyone about a minute to answer. So we're still waiting on a few more answers. We'll give everyone about 10 more seconds, and then we'll go ahead and end our polling. All right, so we'll go ahead and end our polling, bring up the correct answer, and share our results. So the correct answer is D, internal reviewers, right? So that CHFS fact-finding report is reserved for use solely as a internal reviewer. So again, thank you all for participating with these knowledge check questions. We'll stop sharing results at this point, and we will go ahead and move on to our next slide. So again, we're going to take one more 10-minute break. We'll give everyone a chance to stretch their legs. And when we come back, what we will do is we'll go ahead and jump into our Q&A session. So everyone take about a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 10:44 and we'll get started with that Q&A. Hello, welcome back, everybody. So again, we're going to jump into the next section of today's training. So we'll go ahead and move to our next slide. So again, we are going to jump into our question and answer session. So again, if you have any questions about the material we've conducted today so far, please go ahead and utilize that Q&A function that is on your screen on your control panel. Click on that Q&A button and it will allow you to enter your questions there. Again, we encourage everyone to please utilize that instead of the chat box, just because that way it would allow us to save those questions and input them as part of our FAQ. So if you have a question, please use that Q&A button instead of the chat box. But we do have two subject matter experts with us today. We have Pam Smith and Cheryl Hanna on the line today. We appreciate them spending some time with us and being here to answer your questions. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Pam if you would like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks. This is Pam Smith. I think most everybody know who I am. I'm the division director for community alternatives with Medicaid.
So it looks like we have our first question in the Q&A there, Pam. It is, when completing the CHFS fact-finding report, can both incident report and risk mitigation investigation report be selected if further information is needed? Again,
So I'm sorry, yeah, was having some user issues on my side. So and I will let you all know that Alicia is absolutely the expert on answering these questions. So some of these I may have to get back to you. So Teresa, I will get back to you with the answer to that question. I want to make sure that that I give the correct answer, and then I want to make sure I understand exactly what the question is. So you're asking that when a CHFS or when our internal users are completing the fact-finding report, can both the incident report and risk mitigation be selected? So are you asking if you can view both of those reports when you also are completing the fact-finding report?
So I think, Pam, what she means by that is, in that CHFS fact-finding report, there's the option to select either of those to request additional information. And there's a toggle button there, so you can select one or the other, but can you select both at the same time? And Teresa, is that correct? Because if so, we'll have to reach out to Jay Vastani on that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think would have to reach out to Jay, because I honestly do not know if it'll let you select both of those.
Yep. So I'll go ahead, and that's part of, and good thing that we have that in the Q&A there, because again, we'll be able to save these questions and reach out to Jay and put that in our FAQ.
Yeah, I know normally it doesn't let you select two, but I think the best thing is to reach out to Jay on that.
Yeah, that's what we'll do then. Absolutely. And it seems like there's not many questions coming in right now. So if there are any on top of head or top of mind right now, please go ahead and use that Q&A button to input those questions. We have one more question here. Do only critical incidents trigger the risk mitigation and investigation report?
So the risk mitigation report has to be done for all incidents.
Alrighty. We'll give it just a couple more seconds here. It doesn't seem like we're getting too many questions here, Pam. So if there's any more that trickle in the next couple, 30 seconds or so, we can answer those. But if not, are you okay with kind of winding this down and moving towards our evaluation?
Yes, we can do that. And then if you think of questions after, I know I always or sometimes do that, think, oh, I wish I'd asked that, then you can reach out to us and we can answer those separately. And I know that we are working on also kind of compiling an internal FAQ document that we can add those questions to that as well.
Also, as part of the evaluation too, there's a little section there. So if you have any additional questions that you think of during the evaluation, you can input those there as well. And we'll track those and make sure that they're in the FAQ. So it seems like it's kind of silent on the other end. So we'll go ahead at this point, I think, and we'll bring up our next slide, which is going to go over our evaluation. As you can see here on the screen, we have an evaluation link. And again, we encourage everyone to please go ahead and complete that for us. But before we do that, I just want to say a few things. And first and foremost, we appreciate everyone being on the line with us today. Y'all been a great group. You participated with our knowledge check questions and you're actively engaged. So we greatly appreciate that. And again, we thank you all for being with us on this Tuesday morning. But we'll go ahead and we'll allow you to go ahead and complete that evaluation at this point. I'll also put a link in the chat box. That way you can go ahead and just click that link as opposed to having to type it in. And that will bring you to the evaluation. And once you've completed that evaluation, you are all free to go for the day. So again, appreciate everyone joining us. Thank you. All right, so that link should be in your chat box now. Apologies, I just sent it to Pam. I'll send it to everyone. So at this point, like I said, the link should be in your chat box. Go ahead and click that, fill it out. And once you've done that, you're all set. So again, appreciate everyone joining us. Thank you.